Welcome to Thinking Deeply About AI for Schools. I'm James Radburn, and joining me as always is Neil Almond.
And for those just joining us, this is the podcast where we explore the ever so rapidly evolving intersection of artificial intelligence and education. Every month, we pose a big question, examine what's changing in the AI and education landscape, and try to make sense of what it all means for education, students, and the future of learning.
And we're not here to give you all the answers because honestly, we're still trying to figure this out together. Instead, we want to create a space where we can think critically, question assumptions, and explore those possibilities. And each week, we explore one topic, research article, or AI update, and ask the ultimate question: what does this mean for education? This week, we want to go on something slightly different, and it's this research article by E.T.H. Sherwick that sets us out a deceptively hard question. How good is AI-generated music, and how should we judge it? Now, this article doesn't just rely on technical benchmarks because it's quite a unique thing, music, to try and explore that, but they try and put human listeners at the centre. And they compared thousands of AI-generated music clips head-to-head and asked people two questions. Which music do you prefer? And which piece better matches the written prompt? And they checked whether the metrics commonly used by AI research actually aligned with human taste. Now, what was interesting with this was commercial AI music tools like Suno were often preferred by listeners, even outperforming real human-made reference music. And many widely automated evaluation metrics don't reliably reflect that human's judgment. And it kind of reinforces that creativity is fundamentally subjective. Even when AI outputs are technically impressive, they can be really great or they can actually be quite poor. So if AI can now produce creative outputs that people generally like, but humans remain the gold standard for judging creative quality. So it's like, can AI make music we prefer? What do you think, Neil?
It's an interesting one for me. It's one of those things like I don't want it to be true. I notice you have guitars in the back of your screen there blurred out. They're not in my study, but I've got about 3 or 4 upstairs. Spent a lot of my youth as the very happy bedroom guitar player, thinking that one day I would rock Wembley Stadium and thinking, how great is this? I finally found something that I can do as a human being that my brother, another human being, couldn't do. And that was kind of the one thing that I had, was a bit of musical talent in terms of our sort of human intellects going at it. So it's a bit, disconcerting really that all the count. I'm not going to say I went as far as the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours, but the countless hours in the bedroom practicing guitar, to only now be able to prompt something and for some people to prefer that output is quite disheartening for me on a personal level.
Yeah, yeah, I echo that. And it's like, as a kid, my original instrument was the trumpet of all things. But neighbours hated it. They just kept knocking on the door, on the wall every time I practiced. So I never did my practice as I should. And scraped through GCSE music and A-level music. But where my love of music came from was the fact of just playing guitar in youth bands, and played the Archbishop. I played some of the best stuff was at Worcester Cathedral in front of accompanying 400 children, just me and acoustic guitar, which was magical at Christmas and things like that. And there's an enjoyment in it, as well as never rocking Wembley, which I still want to. Never be to that level, but there's a joy in it, isn't there? Creating music, there's a joy and sense of warmth and sense of when you play with other people, that's part of the experience, not just the output as well.
Yeah, it certainly is. And so I think we've got to, just go to the research for a second. Like, we're not talking about 1 or 2 clips and one or two people here. We're talking about, I think it was 6,000 generated sort of music clips were evaluated, and it was like around 15,500 human listeners will put head to head here in this sort of comparative judgment-esque sort of experiment. So, when we're thinking about sort of sample size here, it's pretty incredible, really, the amount that it goes to. But the other argument, I guess, is that does this sort of democratize music for those that either A, couldn't, or B, um, chose not to put all of those hours into learning an instrument that we did growing up. And I think that's an interesting angle, particularly when you think about music creativity in itself. Can you sort of be creative with AI music? I definitely think you can be. You need to know what it is that you want, as with all sort of prompting. You've got to have real sort of decent subject knowledge about what it is that you want. You need to make sure that that you yourself have a degree of sort of musical prowess in terms of the sounds that you want to produce, the time signatures that you want to produce, and all of that sort of thing. And so, are we actually, in one way, sort of democratizing the music creation? I definitely think there should be a warning label is probably too strong of a word, but I definitely think there should be a little footnote somewhere created with AI. I'm beginning to get a little bit suspicious that a couple of bands that have been recommended for me on my music streaming platform of choice are likely to be AI generated, but you can't prove it as such. It's only because I search for the band. I go, oh, I really like this, annoyingly. Never heard of this band before. Google them, and then it comes up with very few hits at all. And I'm like, well, the only reason why that must happen is because the internet has no knowledge of this band because they do not actually exist. And there's economic arguments as to why, I think poor economic arguments as well as to why the streaming companies are doing this effectively. If it's AI music that they throw into their playlists, then they don't have to pay that artist because they themselves have created it. And so it's sort of another nail in the coffin, if you want, for artists sort of making music and discoverability of these artists through these streaming platforms. But I definitely think that there is, I think, and I don't know, and I've got to be, it's hard to judge whether it is just sort of almost jealousy in the fact that I have put the hours into learning an instrument um, to then sort of see the craft sort of become. Um, it's always been a commodity to a sense, but in terms of the actual learning and the performing and the creation of music to a certain level, I think that's, yeah, it's a hard pill for me to swallow, I think, but I appreciate that that is very much, yeah, there is I have a bias here. And if we had someone who wasn't a musician here, perhaps they would have a complete valid opinion about this as well. That's different from us two being sort of, having that background in music.
Yeah, and I think it also depends on the type of music and what you're listening to it for. So, like, I often have music where if I'm going to sleep, I've got certain music I listen to, like, or if I'm working, I've got a certain type of music I'm listening to. And I'm just thinking, as you're talking, like, do I have a problem if that was AI generated? Maybe not. I don't know. Um, but I think there needs to be like an AI watermark or something. I know people have said this around originally they was talk about ChatGPT and how they could have watermarks or hidden prompts and things. I don't think we want to be that hidden around it, but there is something like, does it have a place within the music world? And I know streaming services have, over the last few months in particular, have been trying to be stronger around working out which is AI music and not. And often it is researching because it's quite hard. It's like any AI detection is very hard to see, is this AI generated or not? There's no markers for it. There's no metadata behind it that could prove it. But the other side of it is that, let's say a streaming service bans AI generated music. Or what about those artists that are using AI to support them in the production of music? Is that a problem? And therefore, then you're getting sticky water of like, it's not as simple as a black and white answer. This is AI generated, you can't have it. But saying that, it goes back to on music streaming services like this. We were talking about podcasts. You can create an AI generated podcast quite quickly and quite easily. if you want to, well, is there a problem with that? And it's kind of this whole deception of being involved in doing the process. There's a creativity in that. There's also a process of doing it with others, but also there's a thing about the listening experience. So I think, unfortunately, there may be a place for AI music, but I do worry about the artists who, the small time artists, not the big mega stars, who actually are fighting against the streaming services, which aren't getting the money for their tracks, and then they're getting taken out by a one-man band who is at home using Suno or something else to create music as well. So it's an interesting space we live in. And as you say, the research was vast. It wasn't a small sector of a few people looking at actually which one do you prefer, how do we judge it. And they tried to do that. They tried to use evaluation metrics to actually rank. And often what they found in the research, if you go back to the original sources, how it was quite different to the human perception of music. And everyone likes something slightly different. Like, I'm going to have a different type of music in the car on a long drive at 6 o'clock in the morning than I am on the going to work in before planning this podcast. So yeah, it's not a straightforward answer, this, is it?
No, and I think you touch on like a bigger issue sort of around like the creation of things, and it's something that I'm quite sort of conscious of from like the newsletter perspective. It's like there is, I think, a crisis in confidence as to whether is this work the work with that individual just by themselves? Is this actually us, James? Have we just written this out and we've trained a LLM in sort of our voices? Is this real? And then you get to those kind of existential questions of like, what is real? What is reality anyway? Does it matter? And then when you think about music as well, what I think it kind of does, and I think it's quite interesting from the musician perspective, is that it makes you realize that music, as wonderful as it is, and how one reacts and sort of responds to music. Well, really, you can only sort of do that in two ways. One, it's because like a lyric sort of takes you by surprise and you really enjoy that. And then the other way is then it's like melodies and how you've sort of layered harmonies together. And if computers can do that, well, then that tells us that actually music, and Pythagoras was talking about this several thousands years ago, that music is nature and nature is mathematics. And so almost like an existential crisis then as to what music is, and what we respond to isn't necessarily as such a completely done by the musician, but actually just it's our response to the way that physics around us has been manipulated through vibrations. And then that is a worrying thought and scary thought, I think, but also quite it's an interesting one. When I was thinking about this podcast as well, kind of makes you really think about what music actually is. And as I say, if computers can recreate it, then to some degree it is mathematics, because that's what computers deal in.
Starts to fade, we're here to light it again. Saturday morning starts here, T8 Northwest. Make it clear, we're talking about the how, not just the why. Little shifts that change your life. I wanna leave with something real. Ideas I can see, I can feel. So when it's Monday and the bell rings loud, I'll hear this chorus in the class and in the crowd. Post-its on the table, stories in the air. Try this on a Tuesday. turn, I was there. We're trading tiny triumphs and the times we missed, turning every that won't work into let's try this. We're not chasing some perfect grade, we're just shaping the lives we meet. Every strategy, every phrase is a promise we keep. Saturday morning starts here, T8 Northwest. Make it clear we're talking about the how, not just the why. Little shifts that change a life. I wanna leave with something real, actions I can hold, I can feel. So when it's Monday and the bell rings loud, I hear this chorus in the class and in the crowd. 28th of March, write it down, hold it close. Oh, every hallway chat, every scribbled note. Will I speak up more? Will I listen hard? Take the best of this day back into my yard. From St. Helens to the staff room door, I'm not the same as I was before. Saturday morning starts here, T8 Northwest. Make it clear we're talking about the how, not just the why. Little shifts that change a life. I'm gonna walk out feeling new with 3 good things I know I'll do. So when it's Monday and the bell rings loud, I'll hear this chorus in the class and in the crowd. Saturday morning starts here. And it carries on all year.
There's this artist called Jacob Collier who you'll find his music online, and he breaks the rules of music. He is so musically gifted. He brought out a 5-string guitar recently because you've got 5 fingers, was his rationale. And actually, he's won so many Grammy Awards. It's quite impressive how he works. But he's got perfect pitch. He can hear pitches between notes on a piano and things like this. It's scary, his knowledge of music. But he's not a mainstream. He is a mainstream musician, but he's not like a pop star in that level. But his music will appeal to another sector of people. And that's why he's won all his Grammys and things as well. So then comes back to what is creativity? And actually, what do we mean by creating music? It's like an expression. And he expresses himself through the music for others to benefit from it and enjoy something. And I try to, it's always funny going into AI, isn't it? And asking what creativity or what these definitions are. And obviously it's trained on my knowledge. So it gave me about 4 different definitions of creativity. But the first one, and I don't think I agree with this, I wonder what you think, is creativity is the ability to generate new and useful ideas by combining imagination, knowledge, and skill. I don't know.
No, don't like it.
No.
I take I'm not sure the word to really describe it, but and I think it's where a lot of the issues around creativity come in. Like if a child produces a note on a ukulele, because that's the instrument that they teach them, and then as far as I'm concerned, that child has created something. What was not there has now been created. And so this idea that we like tie creativity with something new, I think is an issue, because I don't think that is the way that creativity can work, because I think if we're taking creativity to mean the construction of something brand new that has sort of been brought into existence by some means that was not there before, then none of us are very creative because, I think it's the Steve Jobs, great artists steal and all of that sort of thing. Nothing is original. Um, and so I think taking it to the individual and be like, well, you on a personal level have never done that before, whether that is writing a sentence, whether that is writing a story, whether that's copying a story, doing some mathematics that, you couldn't do 20 minutes ago. For me, you are being creative because you have done something that you have not been able to do before. Some instruction or some discovery or whatever it might be. I'm not saying not getting into sort of pedagogical dichotomies here with this sort of aspect of creativity. I think that's where I am with creativity anyway.
Yeah, and it's often creativity is, as you said, it's through imitation to start off with, and a lot of these things before you take it yourself and you create something from it. And I think this whole idea of the article looks at and the research looks at how can we measure it. I think that's really interesting because can you measure a subjective thing like music? So we're both going to like something completely different in music. I'm having a great time at the moment with my oldest, and we're just going through like the old school indie anthems. We're on Kasabian at the moment. We're on like just going through music education with him. My youngest just wants rock music, and he knows what rock music is. He was like, "Is this rock music?" Or Taylor Swift comes on. He was like, "No, I want rock music." So I was like, "Okay, he's trained well already." But everything's subjective, and through creativity, and through music, you'll go through periods of liking certain music, going in and out, as you say earlier. You'll be introduced to a new band, or you listen to it together. So I think there's a thing around music where it's not just a individual; it's like a shared process and shared element of it, and it's quite a unique medium.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that you can come up with any sort of meaningful measurement of creativity. I mean, you can obviously do the whole sort of, well, certain artists have stood the test of time, and so therefore, from a sort of cultural capitalesque sort of point of view, there's powerful knowledge in the sense of children knowing who the Beatles were because friends of the show, the rest of history. I was listening to a podcast that they were doing on the Beatles around sort of historical significance of the Beatles, and I think they've got it sort of right on, and they were creative. Now they were creative for reasons that we wouldn't necessarily want children to be creative too, because there was a large amount of experimentation with substances that we definitely wouldn't want children to go near in the name of creativity. But what was interesting was that on that particular series of The Rest is History, one of the regular hosts like just refused to do it because he does not like the Beatles. He doesn't think that they are all that culturally significant, and so they had to find like another host to sort of fill in that spot. I think it was Conan O'Brien, funnily enough, from America, who has substantial knowledge about the Beatles. Who knew? And so I think if you have historians who argue around significance and that sort of thing, then I definitely think that this idea of any sort of empirical test that can be done around sort of creativity is doomed to fail, really. And I blame the OECD.
But it's also like when we think about creativity within schools, it's more like we're measuring the application of skill. So I'm just thinking back to my A-level music I don't know how I scraped through it, but it was the application of in the composition elements of the different textures and genres I could create. It was a film score, so did it have the mood and melody that would fit to that? And it could be as simple as a complex it needed. And it reminded me of a thing I read the other day where it was a film director who submitted an Oscar-worthy film and didn't get full marks for it because they're measuring something different. They're measuring the application of skill. That doesn't mean subjectively someone's going to like it as well.
And I would imagine with your A levels, there would have been a rubric, and then to what extent, going back to the artist that you mentioned earlier, who sort of transcend sort of, the musical grammar, as it were. If he's not following the rubric, then despite how quote unquote creative he's being, he's not getting the marks that are needed. And so, to then what extent are we actually measuring creativity and just sort of checking against a rubric? And is that creativity?
Or is it on the way to creativity? Do you need to have the application of some skill before you then can be creative with it?
I think so. I think if you look at all the times throughout history that music has sort of transcended sort of the conventions of its time, you go back to those musicians and, they were trained in the grammar of the day and they knew what they were doing and they knew what they were breaking and they made it work. I think there would probably be very few musicians who didn't have that sort of musical grammar training practice purely because they're victims of the environment they were brought up in. They were listening to those songs, and that was the kind of things that they, would have picked up on, or to say, if they were more formally taught, the things that they would have been, the content that they would have been taught about. And it's only when you know that you realize that you can then, break this mold and work out why it works, and as I say, be creative. But as I say, it's definitely on its way. And again, that's why I think we'll find that going back to AI music, why I think you're going to find, there's going to be real sort of sandboxes as to what AI music will be able to create. And, it is not, I don't think, going to be able to massively break or change the mold by itself. And what I mean by that is that just sort of through prompting, purely because the way that these things work, again, training data, it's trained on all these songs, and what's, most popular songs in the world, as much as it pains me to say it, is a 4x4 time signature and four chords, maybe five if you're lucky, maybe sometimes three. And if that's its training data, it's going to have a bias towards that training data, and that means you're very unlikely to get much else really. And there's a reason that simple formula works, because the Western ear really likes it. We find it sort of catchy, whatever that is. I kind of think that that's kind of, in terms of AI, we're sort of not going to be able to get it to do anything massively out of the mold of what it can already, what it's trained on. And I think that's kind of a feature, not a bug. And perhaps that's where music and musicians can still sort of find that niche. And we're going to kind of find musicians who are going to have to sort of break out of this mold a little bit, particularly, as I say, not the mega artists, but the other artists. That's what they're going to have to do, try and create music that is both at the same time pleasing to a certain subset of the population so that they get popular, but not your simple kind of 4/4 time signature, four chords, and a key change to the fifth.
Yeah, and I equated AI music a little bit. I was playing over Christmas break, and it was fascinating what it could come up with. So I just put a prompt in of driving down for Christmas. I think it'll put it as a country song, seeing the cousins, and it was a bit of a laugh. It was great, and it depends how you use it, how you treat it, and if it's part of the process and it supports you to create something, that's fascinating. But I think it's where it breaks the mold. Humans will break the mold. AI will break the mold at points, but as you say, it's beholden to the training data that we give it as well. In terms of it, and I do wonder with almost the DFE, and I know we'll probably do a later podcast on like what's coming out with a DFE with everything, but they are trying to put more of an emphasis on the creative subjects in particular. And if you look at what they're proposing with Progress 8, didn't really ban art subjects, but they made them a risky choice in terms of a performance-driven system. And now where they're looking, where entry into creative subjects fell quite a few percentage points over that period, they are now trying to, with the new reform, actually say, right, we do want the creative subjects, we do want this creative language computing, whatever they class creative as almost, to add that breadth as well. And I do wonder where, if we're seeing more of those subjects taken by pupils in the future, and what breadth of that human creativity will come out of fruition from it all. And it's quite an interesting time we live in, looking at the curriculum subject review and what will come from that. So English and maths and the core skills and sciences are there, and they always will be there, but they want to add this breadth to it. And it comes back to what makes us human, and how we can have that exciting things with art or music or all of these other things. And it's not music related, but one of the things I do in a lot of my training sessions is the kind of a real or fake game.
Mm-hmm.
And I always talk about, there are some elements of having fake imagery or resources. They can be used effectively. But it's where people lie about their use or try and pass it off for themselves. That's where the problem is. But there's one picture that I always put in that I think in 99% of people guess it, that it's real, is a photo that won a photography competition, but it's actually fake. And it's just an interesting element of, imagine 5 years' time, will AI or technology, where would it be in this process? And I think AI will be there in music, but I think we've still got to have that human element of taste and what we have to have a say in what we like. We can't rely on AI saying this is the AI music we're going to get in and this is what we have to listen to. I think we have to stand our ground and say, okay, we like this, we don't like that, I'm going to create this, or use AI to help us do that as well. So I think we just need to make sure that every decision we do and we think of is, what's our opinion on it? Where do we stand in this? And not get beholden from create loads of content, it's AI created, but who cares? Let's create stuff that is important for us. And it's not just creating stuff, it's the process of it is as important as the final product.
Yeah, because that is where the growth in musicianship and music itself all comes from. It's that process. It's, every artist enjoys, that's what it's about, right? Suffering for your art. And
Yeah.
that's the process. Just to bring it back to practicalities, I wish I had something like this for like class assemblies. It would have made my class assemblies far more interesting than they were if I could say, we were learning about the Romans, we've been learning Roman numerals in maths, we've been learning about this in geography, this in art. Give us like a 2.5 minute like stadium anthem about all of that, and we'd learn it, and it would have been great. And I kind of, part of me wants to go back to the class just to do that, just to see what it's all about.
And just seeing the kids' faces when you create something like that, it's just fascinating. And they listen to it, they want to listen to it again and again. And it's like, if it's got their name in it, or if it's got something that's related to them, or as you say, if it's like about the Romans and you're able to prompt it and produce something like Boudicca's speech or the introduction to something like that, it'd be incredible, because it's just another way in rather than the mediums of talking or watching a video that's not necessarily relevant as well. And I think music could be a great way. Gatekeep into the classroom into a whole host of things.
I imagine there are already some absolute bangers, and I don't want to take away from, what's his name? Jack Hartman. He's the absolute goat, I believe, is what the children say when it comes to mathematical songs. But to have it done in a way that is, fits the style of music that you're learning about in music, for example, I think would be would just be an incredible thing to do. And again, it's so easy. Like I say, it's democratized now. The creation of music is democratized, and you don't need, obviously you're going to get better outputs if you know a bit about music, but you can still say, I want it to sound like this, I want it to contain these, and you will get something. So you may not like it, but you will have created music. Fundamentally, it didn't exist 2 minutes before you put that prompt in, 2 minutes afterwards, it has.
It's about that purpose. what are we doing? Are we creating it for the outcome, or are we creating music ourselves because we want to be part of the process? And it's what's your intent? And so I think it does have a place. What that place will look like, even in 6 months, 12 months time, will change. But I think if you are purposeful and think about it, I think AI in music does have a thing. But I think it's what's most important is I think nowadays, especially with social media, you're told what to like and what not to like.
Yeah.
We've got to keep that human element in there. And it's fascinating that we will see something completely different in music than an AI trying to evaluate it itself. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong in it. And then always go back to the concept of chess or AlphaGo, the fact that AI can beat humans at it, but we still play it. We still want to enjoy that process of it. So I think, yeah, keep the human in there, however it looks, whether it's there to create it or whether it's there to prompt an output that we can use or use it as part of a process. I think
Yeah.
that's probably the message that we come away with.
And that's why I think the watermark is really important, because you can then go, oh, this is like nice. I enjoyed that. It was AI created. It was fine. Versus, oh, I actually really appreciate what X artist has done there. And wow, I never thought of doing it like that. And so like, I feel like when you have that knowledge of who has created it, you can better appreciate the the raw talent, the decisions that have been made from the human element rather than the AI that would have just
Yeah.
black box thinking generated something.
It's always like with music, you always have a guilty pleasure, don't you? Of like a band or something, and you think like, oh, that's cheesy, but who else would like it? I think we may come with that with AI. There's some guilty pleasure that's actually quite good.
Yeah, no, I say I think I have one, but I don't know, and that's the
Yeah.
sad thing. I wouldn't mind. I mind not knowing.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you for listening to Thinking Deeply about AI for Schools. I'm Neil Almond, and joining me, as always, was James Radburn. Now, whether you want to create your own AI music or you think that it is should not be part of the conversation at all, it kind of just reminds us, as James mentioned there, that regarding all of this AI, that AI-ness that is appearing all over our computer screens, that keeping that human in the loop and being aware of human creativity is more important now than possibly at any other point, I think, during our time on this planet. So if you've enjoyed this conversation, subscribe and join us next time as we continue thinking deeply about AI in schools.
Thank you.